African film industry. And if you have any questions.
I think we have enough time to go into the details. So thank you for that. Thank you, Atza. I'll then hand over to Beverly Mitchell. Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beverly Mitchell. I've worked as a producer, director, writer, been in the industry for 28 years. I was part of the first group of left filmmakers who entered the SABC back in 1994 with our first democratic elections. I come from an activist background. I was part of the underground during the struggle against apartheid. So I witnessed them take down the last apartheid president, F.W. de Klerk's painting and putting up Nelson Mandela. So I've lived through all of that. I've recently been appointed as the Vice President of Scripted at Trace Studios, which is part of Trace International. And Trace Studios is a new initiative, which is basically a company that is now producing content for the African and the global market.
Thank you. To you, Beverly. Kaylin, naturally. And you're muted.
Okay, I'm back here. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kaylin Bason. I'm from Namibia. I've been in the industry now for the past 14 years. I started when I was 15 as a runner and have since worked my way up to producing. I'm a lawyer by training, but the film industry bug bit me when I was 15. It hasn't quite left me yet. I'm also part of Tala Namibia. Tomorrow, actually, we are hosting a prize giving for the first online film festival that Namibia hosted this year, and I'm part of that organization. And I'm also the chairperson of the Filmmakers Association of Namibia. So hi again to everyone. I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Kaylin. And handing over to you, Mahmoud. Oh, and you're muted.
Well, I said I am M, Jackie is J. Russell, you're missing your alphabet.
Yeah, you caught me there. Jackie, are you good to go?
Okay, I'll go next. My name is Jackie Mutsepe. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission. So it's great to be here. We've really put this together. Well, it's been put together by Chipo and Russell. We were really just backing this initiative to commemorate Africa Month. We think it's important that we discuss collaboration across the continent, something that we've been very active in for at least the past 5-6 years as the KZN Film Commission. So I'm there as the Chief Operations Officer. I've been in the industry. I actually did my calculations after listening to Beverly, but I've been in the industry for 26 years, actually. I joined in 1995 at the SABC. I worked for the first Democratic Board with Dr. Ivy Matsipe-Kasaburi and Zwelakhe Sisulu. So yes, I've had a long career in the industry, worked at the National Film and Video Foundation and other initiatives, NIMISA, and so on within the industry. So, and I'm now in Durban at the KwaZulu-Natal Film Commission. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion and seeing how we can take this forward in terms of our Africa collaboration. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Mahmoud, you can't run away. You're on the hot seats now. Over to you. You're muted. You're muted, Mahmoud.
I've mistakenly muted. Sorry again. Good evening, everyone. I once again introduce myself. My name is Mahmoud Ali Balogun, a Nigerian filmmaker. I run a company called Brick House Media. We produce movies, commercials, and documentaries. You know, you have to make ends meet. You do everything together. You know, you don't just specialize in one. I've been involved in a lot of advocacy for the industry in Nigeria. I was involved with the setting up of several of the guilds that we have in Nigeria today, professional guilds and associations. I, at one point or the other, headed some of them. Currently, I head the Audiovisual Rights Society of Nigeria, a collective management organization for collecting royalties on behalf of filmmakers in Nigeria, collection in Nigeria, and with countries we have reciprocal agreements. And I'm also involved with co-productions here and there. I'm currently on a co-production with the South African COSI, the KZN Film Commission. And also I've been involved with a lot of festivals as a juror, organizer. I was advisor to AFRIF, Zuma Film Festival. I've been at several festivals. I've been on their jury and one panel or the other. And like I said earlier, I was advisor at one point to FEPASI, the Pan-African Film Organization. And well, they traveled a little bit. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Over to you, Wangeshi.
Hi, Russell. Hello, everyone. My name is Wangeshi Murage. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm a media content executive. What we do with Media Pros Africa, which is the company that I run, is we develop content strategies in production, distribution, and marketing. So I'm very excited to be here together with the panelists to discuss matters with regards to how we can be able then to come up with proper, innovative, sustainable strategies that will help us continue to develop and grow the African cinema and the African film industry. So I'm excited about that and really looking forward to it.
Okay, last not least, I'll introduce myself. I'm Russell Hlongwane. I'm a cultural producer and a creative industries consultant. So I'm very interested in matters concerning the creative economy, mechanism and structures that could support creatives. I'm talking the entire creative economy here, not only film. So in that capacity, I do program design. I consult for funders and organizations that are interested in supporting creative talent on the continent. I do that work locally across the continent as well as abroad. So it's my honor and pleasure to moderate this session. This is the first of two conversations. We had the first one from 2 p.m. South African time this afternoon all the way till 4 o'clock, and this kind of bookends that conversation. So what I'll do is read the background and maybe kind of outline the focus of this conversation. Then I think that will lead us quite smoothly into the set of questions that we're looking to tease out. I will then face away from the screen so that my thoughts are channeled. So here goes the context. The Africa Month program is one of the African Union's Agenda 2063 implementation plans and the Charter for African Cultural Renaissance. As part of these celebrations, we are hosting a roundtable on the states of film in Africa post-COVID-19. This engagement will be part of a broader contribution to the discussions about a borderless Africa to promote cultural exchange and the strengthening of dynamics and collaborative networks, meaning partnerships within the sector. The aim is to spark a continued intra-Africa countries film conversation with the possibility of establishing a United Africa Film Festival, which would be equally owned by the continent's member states and held every year during Africa Month, using the BRICS Film Festival as a model for rotation and equal ownership. I'll now talk about the focus of this conversation. Set against a highly fragmented film and television industry, how might the film sector in Africa work together? This is a question in need of an impossible answer if we're cognizant of the stark differences in audiences, language barriers, access to film education, access to screens, distribution networks, and varying policy positions amongst member states, as well as funding structures, of course. In pursuit of tackling this vision, we could start out with teasing a set of questions that we think help us to start to mobilize a set of ideas, ambitions, and motivations for this United African Film Festival. And as a general note, the conversation should be grounded in our African reality. And I think it would also be important to converse around feasible ideas, whilst being courageous enough to position some ambitious goals for this Pan-African initiative. So as a starting point, I think it might be interesting to ask you, panelists, to think around the necessity of starting or establishing a new body to undertake such an initiative, considering that there have been similar initiatives that have happened before, for some reason or the other, have never quite seen any kind of they haven't manifested the goals or the ambitions that they'd set forth for themselves. So does it make sense for us to establish something completely new, or does it make sense to rejuvenate or resuscitate these latent bodies that have since been established before? And I'll kind of leave this open and allow anyone who's feeling warm enough to take this on and kind of think through this. Do we start something new? Do we maybe revert to a previous initiative that could manifest the ambitions of this conversation? I mean, if all right, okay, we've got Beverly. I was going to choose someone. Go for it, Beverly. And you have to unmute yourself before you go on.
I'm a bit hesitant about forming structures. We have been inundated in the last, good Lord, 20. I mean, I was part of Sitengi. Some of you are too young to remember Sitengi, but I'm sure you remember Sitengi, Mahmoud. From that time already, FESPAC, all of these organizations trying to, and I understand that people this afternoon were saying that they're tired of talking and that these structures, exist and then nothing happens. For me, I think maybe because I see myself as a doing word, as someone that takes action rather than having meetings about meetings, is that we've got to find a more proactive way than the old way of forming organizations, and that organizations will take forward. And I'm talking in the context of just what I've done since taking up the mantle at Trace. I started on the 1st of May, and already we are doing a co-production with a Nigerian project for Canal Plus in France. We're about to do the same with a Ghanaian company, and we're busy developing a project with Kenya. So for me, it's about taking the bull by the horns. If you believe in it, let's just do it, rather than forming these laborious structures where we have meetings about meetings and we talk about talk and we talk. It's just very frustrating.
Caitlin, you wanted to come in after Beverly. Feel free.
Yes. So I agree to some extent with Beverly's point of view. So I'm the chairperson of the Filmmakers Association of Namibia, which we've only revived in October 2020. After it has been dormant for about 3 years. And the dormancy came about because the filmmakers, we found, place so much onus and emphasis on the board of FAN, which is the Filmmakers Association, that they need to find solutions, not realizing that the association is the members itself, that we can't do much without the participation and the engagement of the members. So we have since revived the association now, since October 2020, with a renewed strategy, as we've realized that what we've been doing so far has not been working in terms of just having a central point of contact for the filmmakers within the country. So I don't agree with organization upon organization, but I do quite like the idea of having a point where filmmakers could either give suggestions or point out issues within the industry or share on the platform of opportunities that are available possibly with the community at large. So that aspect of it, I really do appreciate. But it is quite a challenge, however, to get everyone engaged on a level to understand that it is a collective and it will only work with its members, and that the onus should not be on the few board members that any association might have.
Thanks for that, Kaylin. Jackie, you may go next, and Wangeshi, feel free to come in. Mahmoud, did I see you raise a hand there?
Yes.
Okay, and kind of feel free to pass the conversation. You don't need me to take from one panelist to the next. So, handing over to you, Jackie.
Thank you. Yes, no, I'm very much with Beverly here. You know, I think over very many years we've had lots of structures across the continent. Some still exist, you know, some are dormant, and some have since become defunct. I was listening, you know, quite intently to the discussion earlier. And I think that, you know, we've been very good at diagnosing the problem and the problems on the continent. You know, I think we're expert at that. We're very good at that. We know where the challenges are. And I think for us now to become more solution orientated is where we need to go. And I think that's where this discussion is prompting us to go. It's good to understand where we've come from. We've got a very rich history, you know, as was very well articulated earlier today, you know, in terms of the forefathers really that have brought us to where we are today as an industry on the continent. So I think doing, and I'm also very much a behind the scenes kind of person who believes that rather let's get it done. Let's see what we can do. And you know, we can discuss our successes after that. So we've really looked at initiatives within Nigeria. I mean, I went to Lagos, Calabar actually for the first time in 2014. It was my first time in Nigeria, you know. And I think quite often, you know, as Africans, maybe we don't travel, we don't visit, we travel maybe internationally, but visiting each other's countries is something that we don't do. You know, we don't know each other's countries, we don't know each other. So it was a huge eye-opener for me to go to Nigeria, to go to Nollywood, which is where it was in the heart of Nollywood, the whole Nollywood industry was there. And to really see how vast of an industry it is, and, you know, how well made actually the films are, despite you know, the perceptions that we have. There are some really good films, and also there were a lot of filmmakers from across the continent. And this is where this whole dialogue started. That actually, why is it that we're not working together more and making films together, co-producing, or you know, whatever we would want to call it. And since then, you know, we've really pursued that. We've been to Nigeria almost every year, except for COVID, obviously. And we've also been to Nairobi in Kenya, which is another, you know, center of film on the continent. And we've already made one South African Nigerian co-production film, Comatose. And we're in the process of, you know, making the second one. And, you know, we are also developing a film with Kenya. And we really do believe that this is the way to go. You know, we all have something to offer in our different countries. We've got our strengths and our weaknesses. We saw Nigeria, obviously, as this big Nollywood industry that's continental. It's actually across the whole diaspora. Huge audiences, very big on distribution. We're very big on production, maybe not so huge when it comes to issues of distribution. So how can we come together and bring the best of what we have and collaborate in that way? So that's what we've been very much focused on over the last few years. Thanks.
Okay, let me jump in here. I agree with what the other panelists have said with regards to what needs to be looked into. But just in reference to your question, Russell, as to whether this initiative that we are looking at forming, whether there is need for it, or is it just a moot point? Is it something that we should move forward with? And I think it's an absolutely brilliant initiative. We should definitely move with it. However, we have to be cognizant of the fact that there have been past initiatives that have been set up and have not worked. And the panelists have also talked about structures. We come up with these initiatives, we set them, but then they do not fail. They become defunct, as Jackie has said. What is the problem? And I believe this conversation is really to look at that critically, analyze where did we go wrong and what do we need to do to make things right. And from where I sit, and I'm just going to be a little bit hard-hitting and not really skirt around, these issues, we have a problem with governance in Africa. I don't know about the other regions. I'm African, I live in Africa, and I just know that when we are given an opportunity as Africans to develop an industry, to grow our talent, I don't know, maybe get a little bit too excited or greedy for that matter, such that the people that are in place then really do not actualize on the mandate that has been set. So the first thing for me is, even as we are working towards establishing this new initiative, let's make sure that there is proper governance that is going to guide us and to lead us. And at the end of the day, we are the stakeholders. We in the industry, we are the stakeholders. We need to hold these people accountable. So they need to be transparency. They need to share with us records as to how the projects are performing and what projects we intend to also launch, so that we can work together as a community. As Kaylin said, we need to come together to be able to build these projects that are sustainable and also with targets. If something doesn't work, then drop it. Look for something else. You don't have to keep slogging the same horse, and it's not really benefiting you. So I think those are the issues that we need to critically address and think about when we are talking about this whole new initiative. And possibly it could come also with some knowledge or awareness or education, as you have said. We may be coming from a position whereby we don't know how to do it. And if we don't know how to do it, let's borrow a leaf. There's no point of reinventing the wheel. We want to grow Africa. We want to build Africa. So if it's working out really well in Europe, if it's working out really well in the United States, let's borrow that leaf and then see and then make it, customize it for Africans so that then it works for us.
Thank you. Yeah, provocative. I love the direction you're going with this. I acknowledge your hand, but I just want to give Mahmoud and Azar a chance, and then we'll come back to both of you.
I think I should be given the advantage being the only male guy here, so people don't oppress me. Right. Really, I think to go straight to your question, we're going to look at where we're coming from, where we are, the possibility of seeing what we can do. I think if we look at the opportunity we've had to have a coming together when it comes to festivals, had been essentially FESPACO, right? And we know the vision behind the setting up of FESPACO. How has it fared? Will we need to have another festival if FESPACO from the founding fathers have been around a little while? When people were saying they've been around for 25 years, they've been around for about 35 years in this business. FESPACO, the vision that it had was to bring the whole of Africa together, but has it succeeded in doing that? I will say not really, but that's not saying that we shouldn't give it another opportunity, not necessarily FESPACO, but for a new initiative to come up, right? And I will want a kind of a brief, particularly from Jackie, the experience you guys have had with BRICS, right? Has it been something that can encourage this initiative? If so, let's borrow from that. And then this issue of the proliferation of festivals all over the place, I'm not one for such. I've been privileged, I've gone to many festivals across Africa, but I don't want to be hard on some of those festivals, because some of these festivals are just jokes. Pardon my being very open. People who would know me know I say things as they are. I've been to festivals across the continent and across the globe. So for us to say we want to put one together, and like most of the panelists here have said, and the ones in the morning, right? We want to put something together. Yes, the AU has things that they want us to do. We also have things we want should do. But where is the support coming from? Like when Gechi said, our governments, are they sincere? Will they put their weight behind anything we put forward? Right? We have a very different challenges in our countries. We were talking about power earlier before you came on board. Right? There are so many things that our countries are facing that the issue of festival, will they be in the front burner? We have to be realistic, right? What do we really want to achieve with these festivals, really? Our people, are they open to such festivals, right? If you go to festivals around the continent particularly, you will see that some of the festivals are just social gatherings. Once the festival is gone, everything comes to a standstill. Right? We need to go beyond that. So I want to know particularly, Jackie, you need to brief us, what has been the experience with BRICS? Because this one involves different countries, and we want to come together as Africans. There are things we need to look at. What kind of films do we want to present? How do our people consume films, right, on our continent? In Nigeria, we have a culture, of television viewership, and that has helped the growth of our industry. I don't know if that's the experience in other African countries. So some of these issues, we need to look at them critically. It's not just for us to come up with an idea, we want to have a festival, beautiful. But what we have on the ground, is there a way that we can support its rejuvenation? Because it's been established. I mean, we have festivals like Carthage, Cairo, Fespaco. I mean, Sitengi, like people said, just died. I don't know what the politics that got in the way of it. It was a beautiful festival that I attended for like 5 times, you know. So these are some of the things we need to look at. And it has to do with government and the kind of support they give. Thank you for now.
Thanks, Mahmoud. Azza, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much for all these points. Of course, we are all agreed that we need an initiative to collect all the African filmmakers to be creative, to be helpful and supportive for everyone in the industry. Let's speak about the role. What is the role of the film festival? Promoting, helping, distributing, meeting, discussion, creating projects. I want to step back. How can we help making films? I suggest, if you agree, we could discuss it, to create a film fund. As you all said that there were initiatives before and the associations tried to collect the African film, the African Federation of Film Critics, African Federation of Filmmakers. I don't know what they actually did on the ground, but they were created this in a certain moment in the history. Now we are in a different time. What is happening around us in the international film industry? The traditional film industry, they affected very, very much according to the influence of the coronavirus. What can we do to help Africa as African? I believe that we need to think and work to assess a fund. Fund could make films, could make festivals, could assist and train the young African who are approaching the industry. I think it's very, very important too. And it will be easy for the countries and the independent initiative to help, because festival, you know, it's not, I feel that, I don't know if it is to help a fund creating a fund to produce films is something else, not making, you know, a festival to promote, or which is very, very important. I myself, I created a film festival. It is very, very important. But I'm trying to think that how can we attract the governmental institutions with the independent initiatives to collaborate, helping the film industry in Africa. How about this? Creating or assisting a film fund, serve all African countries, give chances to especially the young who are approaching the film industry.
Thank you for this, Asa. And I also just want to affirm here that in no way are we looking to all agree on kind of the same points here. I think the intention is to explore very wide terrain and see what ideas are on the table, and we can interrogate those ideas and let the best ideas survive. And those are the ideas that are taken forward. So thank you for being kind of courageous to go out on that limb. I'll give over to you, Beverly, and Kaylin, you can take up after.
Beverly,
yes, okay. Basically, I absolutely agree with what Azza has been saying. As I was listening, I was thinking, well, we're talking about a festival, but where's the product? You know, where's the films that we're actually going to be showing at these festivals? You know, and I think for me, having worked as an independent producer for most of the time that I've been, funding is one of the most critical issues that face young independent Black filmmakers across the continent, you know. And I think we have to look at ways and mechanisms that can create funding opportunities for people. But again, we have to be very careful how we do that, because having been an independent filmmaker, we've got this thing called gatekeepers in the industry. And particularly these gatekeepers come to the fore when we form these structures, you know, and it keeps a lot of emerging young, very talented filmmakers out, you know, it doesn't allow them in. I remember back, say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was always accused of not being curatable, you know, because I spoke my mind. And so if you behave in a particular way, you were able to access funding, but if you didn't, you were always out in the cold. So I think we have to be very careful how we go about putting these structures in place. But I think a festival is something we should be looking at the end of a plan that we have of how we work together as different countries and different producers from different regions, and the kind of content that we're wanting to be showcasing to the world. And we then have a festival after that, and not first have a festival, because I don't know what we're going to be showing there.
So I completely agree with what has been said so far, and especially with your point in terms of the festival, Beverly. So what I've noticed in terms of my experience within the Namibian film industry, we're one of the smallest, I think, African populations with about 2.5 million people. And I think we can all agree that African films fare exceptionally well on the international platform. This is a given. And I see this already from local Namibian films and various festival platforms that they engage in. But the block that, or the obstacle that I'm observing is, and I think this happens with a lot of filmmakers. We spend 5 years writing a script, for argument's sake. Then we try to get funding for it for the next 2 years. Then we get the funding, and then we film, and then we have a screening, a premiere, and then what? And then that's kind of the end of it. Then we spend the next 5 years writing a new script. So I think one of the most important things, and I heard someone here is doing distribution, is for filmmakers to start thinking about marketing from the onset of the inception of the idea, and not post-production. Then only start thinking, what do I do with my film? And one of the other things that I think is really essential, what I'm experiencing in Namibia, with 2.5 million people, our Namibian Film Commission has a budget of $3 million Namibian dollars a year for the entire country. That is small change. But even with that money, with $3 million to fund films, Namibian dollars, to fund films, the products that we are creating are of international standard. But what we're struggling with essentially, and this is why I'm so excited about this panel discussion, is I find that we have quite a bit of cross-border collaboration, but mostly international and not as much Africa. And then two is to try and learn from other African countries as it relates to incentives. Incentive as it relates to infrastructure, whether it is us getting gear from SA, for instance, with, let's say, the VAT or the import tax being abolished or waived, or whether it is training incentives with other African countries, having our crew or our film students be on sets to get more of an idea of what an actual film set looks like. And then also just general incentives, because I know, for instance, in SA, you get a certain amount of money back in terms of how much money you spend for international production. So there is some incentive for international productions, for instance, to film in South Africa, whereas opposed to Namibia, we're still struggling to get that sort of incentive. And part of that reason is because not everyone, especially when it comes to our policymakers and lawmakers, really understand the value that the film industry serves to every single country. The film industry is one of those industries that literally touches every single other industry, whether it's tourism, hospitality, transport, health and safety, you name it. But the understanding behind our around the industry with our policymakers is still somewhat limited. So I guess what I'm trying to say is what I would like to come out of this discussion is one is for more cross-border collaboration within African countries, and for us to then somehow identify ways where we can make it easier for filmmakers to create with each other, basically. Currently, just to get whether it's permits or visas or equipment from other African countries, there's so much red tape that we experience because of our difference of systems and setting up of things where we can totally basically agree or come to some sort of understanding at some point to enable or to encourage cross-border collaboration. I really, really like the idea of a film fund. And I think part of that reason is because one of the biggest challenges obviously is funding, getting the funding. And normally, or at least in Namibia, the place we look for most is a Namibian Film Commission. And they, like I said, they have a limited budget, whereas our private sectors are not as clued up or rather on board in terms of funding the arts. So a film fund really sounds like an amazing idea. Obviously, if it is set up correctly and appropriately and properly with the input of everyone. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Kaylin. I acknowledge Mahmoud's hand raised, after which Wangeshi, please feel free to pick up the mantle. I hand over to you, Mahmoud.
Thank you, Russell. I want to dovetail from where Colin is coming from. You see, as filmmakers, we are dreamers. We want just to present our passion and get funds, make films, and we enjoy. But the reality is that the way the continent is now and the world generally, particularly post-COVID-19, resources are scarce. So we need to begin to look at how these film festivals have...
Mahmoud, I'm terribly sorry to disturb you, but I have a few complaints that your volume is quite low. Is it possible to increase the volume on your speaker on your laptop?
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
Try again, maybe the max volume if you can.
All right, just a moment.
Thank you.
I'm long-sighted, short-sighted, blah, blah, blah. How about now? An improvement?
Very slight, if at all. But if this is the loudest, it's fine. We'll go ahead.
Okay, let me just try something. Just a moment.
Okay.
Is it better now?
Fine. Let's proceed. It's okay.
Better? Well, like I was saying, we're dreamers, right? We want to make films, we want to drive our passion and all that. One thing is this, right? It's money that we use to make these films. How are we ensuring that this money that we get either from government, and I'm a filmmaker, I'm not a distributor, right? So I'm always concerned about any film I make, how does it return money to me so that I can make the next film. I'm not in an environment where funds are given freely for filmmaking, right? We get loans, we meet our friends to borrow money and all that. I'm having a collaboration, a co-production presently. My partner has gotten almost all the money she needs. I'm still struggling with mine because there are no institutional funding agencies in Nigeria. You go for funds, you get money from either the bank, like any trader will get, or any investor who wants to set up a company. So we need to begin to determine what kind of films we want our people to consume. Will there be such films that will return money on my investment, right? What kind of films are we going to be presenting at these festivals, right? Are there going to be Eurocentric films where we get people from wherever? I mean, I've seen a lot of films at FESPACO, and I wonder, I say, look, will the average man watch this film? In my country, there are films that were brought and they won accolades at festivals, right? But when they were presented at the cinemas, they failed woefully. So we need to begin to determine what kind of films we want to project, what kind of films we want our people to share, particularly across borders. You know, in Nigeria, we very much concentrate on making films that we call commercial films, right? I've worked with, I've encountered a lot of people who come from other countries, and all they're after is make these films, and then the films are left in the archives. The sponsors are just the one who take the film to just festivals. So festivals, what are these festivals for really? Yes, to promote films for distribution, to encourage networking and all that. Are we getting value for money really from some of these festivals? So in trying to put another one together, what should be the focus? What kind of films do we require to be presented? You know, we have a lot of collaborations going on here and there, but we need to begin to determine what kind of films we want to present. Is it just films to drive our passion, or films that we know our people can relate to, such that it will encourage us to make more films? So we need to begin to look at that.
Thanks for that, Mahmoud. Wangeshi, please go ahead. Afterwards, Jackie, you can go after.
All right. Thank you. I want to come in support of what Kaylin said with regards to distribution and marketing. And I've been having this discussion severally on several platforms and directly with producers that I am distributing their content for. Distribution and marketing are very key. It should not be an afterthought. Before you even produce that content, you have your idea, you have your concept, fantastic. But even before you go out on location to either or even raise funds, it's important to know how you are going to make this content aware to the audiences that you're looking at. How are you going to market it? Whom are you talking to? Who's your audience? Where do you want to take it? And this is where the role of the film festivals and other distribution platforms, of course, come into play. So it's important, and even Mahmoud has raised a point with regards to funding. You know, where does this funding come from? Where can we source for this funding? Or even with regards to return on investment. A filmmaker wants to at least be assured that when I make this film, I at least expect to make this back. But for you to at least be able to prepare that, you need to have a proper strategy. And that strategy then needs to look at your potential distribution platforms, so that you can already see that this is how much potentially I am like to make back for my film. So it's very important that we look at that. And just touching a little bit on what Beverly talked about, content and why put, the festival ahead of actually having content? I would like to disagree a little bit on that, because as a distributor, like I said, I receive a lot of content, especially from Africa, because our mandate, our primary objective is to take Africa outside to the world. First of all, to Africa itself, to show Africa what Africa has in terms of content, and then also expose it to the world. And we receive a lot of content that we review on a daily. And this is good content that we are getting. So some, of course, requires improvement, where we guide the producers and the filmmakers. Maybe if you do it this way, we might be able to put your content on this platform. So maybe just adjust one or two things here and there. However, in support of that as well, I do agree, it is important to have the content first before you think of the festivals. I'm a solution person, and hence the strategist. So right now we have we've got very big African film festivals. We've got AFRIF, we've got ZIF, we've got DIF, we've got Rwanda Film Festival. We've got fantastic platforms, that are currently available in Africa. Perhaps what the African Union should be thinking with regards to the Agenda 2063 is how can they come and support the festivals that are currently existing, whether they require funding or whether they need to bring in other international stakeholders, maybe for that training or skill development, and in what other way can they be able to support the current film festivals that are there. And then maybe we can talk about having now a wider United Africa Film Festival that culminates into an eventual thing. It's just like the Oscars. Even in the United States, we have all these festivals, Silicon Valley, and the others. But they also culminate into the Oscars. And we do have our own Oscars here in Africa, AMA, that is run by Pisanyama. Why don't we then put our efforts there instead of building something new? Let us make this then maybe the main festival that unites African content, African festivals. But then let's also support the current festivals that are there, because they're doing an amazing job, a fantastic job. And we also need to support them so that we can support ourselves at large.
I want to add something here, because
sorry, we'll come to you. We've got Jackie in the queue, and then it's over to you. Yeah.
Yes. No. Thank you. I was really going to go back and talk a little bit about. We've got quite a comprehensive incentive program in South Africa, I think, as Kaylin has touched on. We've got rebates, we've got different funds, that support film. We also have about 8 or 9 co-production treaties as South Africa with various countries around the world. But I think we all know that none of these treaties are with any African country. And there have been very many discussions over the years, to see how do we introduce these incentives. There've been government to government, talks with different agencies. But the challenge always, and I think as someone mentioned, is where, is there a fund in that country? With South Africa, like I say, we do have the fund. But what you find is that with a lot of the other African countries, that there isn't necessarily a funding mechanism, because that is what forms the basis of the co-production treaty, because both countries, co-fund the film and they become countries, national films of each country. So funding is a challenge, and really because these discussions have been, going on for many years. I think without any results, even though we hear that, there will possibly be, I think, 2 treaties, hopefully with Africa in the coming years. And we're really looking forward to that happening. And I can't remember which 2 African countries they were in particular. I think the idea of still pursuing the development of content is something that we need to keep doing. And I think it will, if we do that, it will give confidence to the governments to see that, it is possible. If we do put something in place, it is possible for these films to be made. I think the issue with festivals is that, you can only co-produce with people that you know. And, the best platform, to actually meet other filmmakers, from different countries is at a film festival. So it kind of, in a way, has to be a parallel process, that you've got obviously your projects that you've got in mind, you collaborate with another filmmaker that's got projects in mind, and then you eventually agree, on a film that's going to work for both. So that's how I see it. And I think perhaps, the suggestion then from Russell and from Chipo, with looking at the BRICS model, and which is basically a festival that rotates within existing festivals. So you're not recreating a brand new festival. That's how I've seen the BRICS model working, when, and Chipo will probably speak better to this, but I was obviously involved as well on the panel when the BRICS Film Festival came to Durban. And it's using an existing platform within DIF, and then you have the different countries contributing their films. You have a jury that gets put together. And actually in Durban, I don't remember it happening in the other countries, but in Durban, what was also done was that there was an actual film, a co-production film that was made, with each one of the countries that were also broadcast at the film festival. So I think there are very strong film festivals that exist, on the continent, as the panel has said. And these, I think, can be used as platforms, first of all for collaboration, but with a very specific purpose of going, to these festivals, looking for partnerships, looking at ways to develop the content, and then obviously for the films then to be screened at the festivals. It is definitely imperative to look at the entire value chain. I completely agree that we need to put more focus on distribution. This is something that we've learned with Nollywood way more, because the focus definitely is the market there. And we need to think about, the audiences. How are we going to generate revenue for the money that's been put into the films? And festivals, in a way, are a natural place where you can also engage with distributors, with buyers of content. And from that point of view, it's very important to have some kind of a sales element within that festival, so that when the films are there and the filmmakers are there, they are already naturally collaborating with the distributors and the funders of content. The establishment of a fund, I think, is an interesting idea. It's not easy. I think there have been attempts to do this as well in the past. It's really not an easy thing, and perhaps it's something, as other smaller initiatives evolve, it's something that could be discussed along the way as people, see this initiative perhaps growing and build, and it builds some kind of confidence in funders that they are then able to see it as a vehicle that they could possibly support. But I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. I think thanks, Jackie, for addressing the points in very specific and direct ways. And if I'm right, I think I've got Kaylin with your hand up, right? And then Beverly.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, and then Azza, sorry, go ahead. So it's Azza, Kaylin, Beverly, and then you, Mahmoud.
Of course, I am with the idea of establishing a rotating African Film Festival. It is a great idea to work on. And I believe as a civil society, we could make it by our festivals already existed, as you mentioned before. But establishing a film fund will help a lot the African film industry. We have many countries which they don't have a cinema theaters, which they rarely produce films. This idea of establishing a film, I know also it's not easy, but if the African Union could play a role in this, and talk with the countries, the African countries, to participate in this African Film Fund. African Film Fund, this way, will be a non-profit. It will be a non-for-profit African Film Fund. Of course, it will help the industry. I suggest or developing the idea that this film fund better to support the short films and the documentary more than the long narrative films, because those is not expensive to be made, and also are very demanding on this kind of films, the documentaries and the shorts. Also, it gives chances to the young who are emerging and trying to make their first or second films to be in the film industry medium. By making that, we could help festival to have new films. In a second step, it could help creating a cinema theater, like mobile cinema theater, like low budget cinema theater. Many ideas could work on. I think we as we need the festival to promote and present and screen the films, we also need very much to produce films. So I hope that we could also we could like bring the African Bank, whose goals are like mutual in this. They are trying to make like intra-African exchanging on the ground of economy or culture also. So we could work on the independent initiatives and the African Union with African Bank, who has a huge budget. Thank you.
All right. So I made a few notes because obviously there was quite a bit that was mentioned in the last couple of minutes. But I mentioned something before in terms of infrastructure, training and incentives. And training in particular is something that I'm particularly quite passionate about in terms of passing on knowledge and getting the filmmakers the necessary experience on film sets, etc., whether international or cross-border. So in terms of the Film Fund, I think this is one of the things we could definitely focus on. What I think in terms of the Film Fund, obviously, is one that is a great idea. So we've currently started a producers network in Namibia, because we've come to the understanding that as a producer by myself, applying for funding as an individual doesn't mean much, you know. But if I have a group of, for argument's sake, 10 women that have produced films, and we go to whether it's a bank or private institution, and we say, this is what we've produced in the year, this is our collective revenue that we get in a year, obviously that looks much better. And we need to start following this model that we can't do things in isolation. And again, this is why I think this platform is so important for us to start collaborating and putting our ideas and stuff together and then take it from there. The other thing that I've noticed within Namibia, whether it comes to funding or incentives or anything else, is a lack of data. So when we produce a film and we screen it, we normally don't know how many people actually watched it. You know, what was the actual cost of the film or the production? Because obviously people sometimes go into have lower rates, etc. So we are currently from the 12th of May to the 19th of May, we had the first online film festival for Namibia, through which we wanted to gather all of these analytics. And I think Mahmoud mentioned, what kind of films do we want to make? Through this film festival we recently had, we had it open to all kinds of films, whether it's TikTok videos, documentaries, feature films, short films, music videos, etc., just for us to get an understanding of what the Namibian audience like to watch. And funny enough, tomorrow we have the official prize giving of the winner of this festival. So I think part of us moving forward as a continental industry engagement is to really understand the analytics surrounding the film industry. What age groups like watching? From which regions do they watch? Do they stream online, or what categories or genres do they like watching? Once we understand the market, it will be much easier for us to engage in that way. I also mentioned in the beginning, and I think Wangeshi and Jackie reiterated it, is the importance of marketing our film. So I find that personally, we have this deep desire to tell stories. And we put a lot of effort, commitment, energy, and time into telling our story, and not enough into monetizing that film. So I think that's the next thing where the marketing and the distribution come in. With the festival that we currently ran, we want our filmmakers to be able to monetize their films. So for the first time in Namibia, we had all Namibian film for the past 3 decades on one online platform. So even VHS tapes, beta tapes, we had converted for the filmmakers from 30 years ago, pre-independence, for them to now have digital copies. But I mentioned that we take 10 years to write a script, then we get funding, then we make it, and then what? We never really see a return on the product that we have produced. So part of the film fund or this initiative, I think, should be partly in terms of how do we monetize the work that we've done. And that comes in together with the marketing and the distribution, which obviously is a very critical part of all of this, including the data collection. Yep, that's it.
Jackie, just to add to what you had said earlier, I think South Africa is in the process of signing a co-production treaty with Kenya, Algeria, and Ghana, and very possibly Uganda as well. Okay, so we are slowly but surely starting to understand that we have to do cross-continental, intercontinental kind of programs and stuff. But what I'd like to talk about is I suppose what so many people in the industry right now is calling the drunk elephant in the room, or the drunk uncle in the room, is that audience consumption patterns have changed, right? COVID-19 has shown us that feature films at the moment are not really the uppermost in people's funding agendas. Just in this year, I think it was in the beginning of this year, we had a National Film and Video Foundation session with Effie Brown, the African-American producer, and she was saying that the feature film in Hollywood is under threat. Okay, so more and more, I mean, if we just look, Jackie, at our winner last weekend of the best feature film, Griekeland, it was never shown in a theater. Went straight on to Showmax, which is a streamer. So we've got to look at the streamers. The streamers are changing the landscape, particularly for young filmmakers. I think in a positive way. I think they're getting the young filmmakers, unlike us, are getting an opportunity to show their work to audiences in other parts of the world that we could only have dreamt of, I mean, let's say 20 years ago. So I think we have to take into consideration, if we're starting to approach governments and all of this, because they've got so much on the agenda in terms of funding, we have to go to them with a realistic proposal if one is trying to talk about a fund or anything. And for me, I think government's going to turn around and say, but who's going to the cinema these days? And I'm not saying that cinema is dead. Of course, we don't ever want cinema to die, but we do have to take into consideration that audience consumption patterns have changed and streamers are going to become something that we're going to be with for decades to come, and more streamers are coming. Just recently, I mean, Disney's on our doorstep, Amazon's on our doorstep, everyone's on Africa's doorstep. They're all coming here. So I'm saying that even with training, we've got to start making people think that we're no longer talking about 13 parts and 52 parts and 26 parts in old traditional television terms, but we're talking about 8-part limited series, 6-part series that, I mean, so many times now we're getting people phoning me and saying, I've got this great idea. Do I make it a feature film or do I make it a series? Because once you put it out there, it has to be something. It's either a series or it's a feature film. So I do think we have to take into consideration that we're living in the golden age of television, particularly with the streamers, and that we have to start reorienting our thoughts in terms of funding and distribution in that direction as well.
Sure. So we'll take Mahmoud and then come over to you, Kaden.
Well, thank you, Russell. I think I'm going to draw from what Jackie said earlier as regards the BRICS, but I'm going to kind of want to modify my thoughts as regards the way to go if we're going to have anything of the sort. I think one, the idea that it should be located within festivals, existing festivals, and it's rotated, so to speak, will give it a lot of fillip, this whole idea, just like they've done with the BRICS festival. That will be cool, and it will reduce organizational challenges, particularly if it's located within existing festivals of note, not just any festival. And again, I will suggest that films that will be showcased at the United Festival should be themed, so to speak, right? In the sense that there could be a focus theme for the kind of films that needs to be submitted for the festival. I think it will give it a proper focus, and it will help the growth and participation eventually. And again, I want to add to what Beverly said as regards the young people, right? Today, majority of us here, don't worry about us with gray hair. All of us are past our vibrant age as filmmakers. So we need to look at the young people. I know that's one of the challenges I had with FEPASI when I was an advisor to the organization. And I said, look, most of the guys who were running affairs had become dinosaurs, you know, and today you can see what has become of FEPASI is becoming quite irrelevant despite its pioneer status and seeming significance that is lost, you know. So our festivals or whatever we're trying to put together must recognize that young people are the future, and they need to be very involved in whatever is being put together. You know, consumption, like they said, is gone beyond the physical, right? Virtual consumption is what a lot of people are doing now, and it needs to be incorporated into whatever kind of festival we're going to have. Look at us talking today. We are in different parts of the world. So any festival that comes with that, I think will appeal to more people, particularly the demographics I'm talking about. You know, it's important. The physical thing, one, in terms of funding, can be consuming, right? But we can achieve a lot. And we need to bring in young people when putting this structure together. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mahmoud. Kaden, I know that you're next, but I just want to take a few seconds to acknowledge Wangeshi after you, and just to say that we have just under 40 minutes for this conversation. And I must say, I mean, I often say to my colleagues in the sector that the film industry is probably the most organized sector. in the creative economy. And I know that it's not perfect, but this conversation in many ways is testament to that. There's kind of been this very positive, critical, and analytic, I think, approach to the conversation. So I just want to kind of recommend and encourage this tone, and perhaps raise the bar a bit and ask us to maybe start kind of honing in on some low-hanging fruits. Going to use the rest of the 40 minutes to start driving towards some low-hanging fruits, and that we can at least at the end of this conversation bring forward and say, well, here are the 5 things that we think are quite feasible, practical, and possible in the short term. So I'll step back again and hand over to you, Kaylin, and Wangeshi, please feel free to take up after her. Thanks.
So before I get into some of the points I'd like to make, I just want to point out, Russell, I really love that you keep using the phrase creative economy. Before we used to say filmmakers, artists, creators, but saying creative economy automatically puts the financial aspect in terms of what we contribute as creators to our individual countries' GDP, which is obviously something our policymakers is yet to fully or completely understand. I'd like to just touch on what Beverly said. You made a very valid point in terms of how our audience consumption has changed, especially the catalyst, which was COVID-19, really forced us to think outside the box and color outside the lines in terms of how we present our final product to the audience. I'd like to add on to that is not just the nature of the consumption that has changed, but also the rate at which our audiences watch stuff. There's such a hunger and need for content that I think some distributors they find it difficult to meet that demand per se, because we find people binge watching now because it's so extremely accessible. There's a constant need for it, and what we can learn from that moving forward in terms of whether it's a film fund or a festival is to encourage our filmmakers to start thinking on working on multiple projects at a time. I mentioned that we take quite a long time to produce a single piece of work. And we want to play on an international field and we want to take a seat. But the question remains, are we ready to take that seat at the table? In the terms of, do we have the content available? We constantly ask ourselves here in Namibia, if Netflix is knocking on our door and say, what do you have available? Would we have something to present immediately to them? And then the other thing that Mahmoud touched on was just in terms, again, of the younger generation in terms of training. So I've mentioned before that I'm quite passionate about the training aspect of the film industry. And the reason for that is that I find within Namibia, we have a lot of people, we lose a lot of the creatives or crew members because our film industry is not consistent. So if there's no work for 3 months, we lose a gaffer or we lose a sound guy and they decide, I'm going to go work for the corporates rather, So one of the things I would really like to come out of this, because one of my main concerns as chairperson of FAN is to constantly keep my crew members employed. And we can do that if we can ensure that they're all trained on a certain level. So when we do have international productions that come in, which Namibia does a lot because we're a location-based country, that they hire or employ more of our local people as opposed to constantly bringing in internationals. And one such way that we can do that and ensure that our crew members are of quality is for cross-border collaboration amongst African countries to make sure they get the experience necessary so when a seat opens up at the table that we're ready to take it. The other thing is just about the creative ecosystem. What we've realized now in Namibia is that if a production comes with a local or international, so much of that money leaves the country again. Because so much of international crew is coming in. And I think this is the situation with many other African countries as well. We don't necessarily always think in terms of, okay, so we get a wardrobe person in, but then the clothes are manufactured in another country. Or, okay, we have a local camera person, but we hire all our gear from South Africa. To start thinking about the ecosystem in terms of how every single thing links up, whether it is the cleaner on a film set, the director, a trainee or whatever, to try and keep the finances within the country, obviously to improve the opportunities within the country. But then again, also to encourage cross-border collaboration, to keep all our people employed all the time. I think that's it.
Okay. I just want to, first of all, say the whole idea about funding through collaboration is really good, and with what Kaylin is doing in Namibia. We do have a similar situation here in Kenya as well, whereby filmmakers are not in a position to raise funds or to get loans from banks. And this is because we are either do not understand exactly the business as to how to be able to get those funds, or maybe we don't have that experience. Because when you look at a situation where you have a new filmmaker, they don't really have much to show by. So the banks, of course, will be hesitant as to how they can be able to loan that individual money without having proof that they have been successful in their business. So it's important, I think, when we collaborate as filmmakers to see how then we can be able to source for these funds together. But that's not really actually what I want to talk about. And I want to share with you an experience that I'm currently going through at the moment, and it's with regards to content monetization. What has happened, and Beverly has even mentioned this, the audience consumption trends have changed. So have the distribution platforms as well. We have so many opportunities. We've got so many platforms. We are spoiled for choice. We've got YouTube. Filmmakers and producers are now within their own right, even distributors, because you can have your own channel that you can monetize on. Even I, as Wageshi, have a YouTube channel. So I am a broadcaster. I've got 3 videos, but hey, you know what? I'm still a broadcaster. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are so many opportunities now for filmmakers to tap into with regards as to how they can get their content out there to their audiences and also monetize. I want to share with you an example of a film that I'm currently going through distribution right now. And this is on a telco platform. So because of COVID and everything, as Beverly said, things have changed. There has been a disruption in the industry and as to how film goes through the distribution cycle. It's not cinema anymore, and then you do VOD, and then you have your pay TV, you have your free-to-air, and then maybe potentially you can sell it maybe on disc or something. This shift has made us rethink as distributors as to how then is the best way to get this content out there and monetize. If we can't do cinema now because we have restrictions as to social gathering and rules, COVID protocols and guidelines, then what do? Because you cannot produce a film and then have it sit on the shelf. You've invested money in that film. And Mahmoud has said he also wants to make money. He wants to see return on investment. So then how do you ensure that you still get your return on investment, even if it's not to the level or to the extent that you had expected before, but what can you be able to recoup? And so one of the things that we've done with a film that is actually launching tomorrow, it's launching on a mobile platform. In Kenya, we have Safaricom. It's the largest mobile network provider. And they have created a VOD platform where their subscribers can now watch content on it. And we are launching our film there. So you can imagine from cinema, this film is new, it's fresh, it hasn't done cinema because we can't do cinema right now. We are definitely looking at doing festivals because, and now I love the way festivals have gone into a hybrid situation whereby you can either attend physically or you can also screen it, you can watch it virtually. Therefore, actually giving the film even more exposure to larger audiences. But now, even with that, we do have now the telephony industry coming into the content business. They are now becoming broadcasters, and they are doing it in a very clever way that we have to appreciate, because they're not saying come and pay and subscribe like maybe on Showmax or Netflix or whatever for this dollars. They're just saying come with the minimum amount, you know, that amount of money that you use to buy airtime or put credit or data. That's what they're saying. just put that amount of money, as little as 10 Kenya shillings, that is what we are currently pricing it at, and be able to watch this grand film, new, fresh, never seen before, high production quality. It's called Mission to Rescue, and I will share with you the trailer after this. I'm sure you will absolutely love it. I wish you were in Kenya to watch this film with us, because it's amazing. It is brilliant. And so now, because of that disruption, we've had to be creative and think about how can we be able to monetize on this film. It's a first in Kenya. It has never been done before. It's going to be a learning lesson for us. We are hoping that it's going to be successful, because if it is, then now this is where now again, as Africa, we come in and look at now the different partners, the different telcos. How can they also partner or engage, so that even when we are launching this film on Safaricom's base, which is only available in Kenya, can we also do it on MTN? Can we also do it on Airtel? So that way, then we are reaching out now to even a broader audience, but on different platforms. So this whole thing of also exclusivity, distribution platforms have to really rethink that. Exclusivity does not apply anymore. It's really about territory and the reach that we need to get when it comes to that.
Thanks, Wangeshi. Kaylin, I noticed your hand, but I just wanna move over to Mahmoud quickly, and then we come back to you. Yeah. And Wangeshi, I often send an invoice for self-promotion and promotion of products on panel discussions. So please.
All right. No problem. You can say it.
Thank you, Russell. I think you need to be right. No, seriously, I can see the excitement from Wangechi on the telcos coming on board to create platforms. But there are challenges there. You know, I mentioned earlier that I head the Audiovisual Rights Society of Nigeria, right? As you think the telcos are helping you in the exposure of your films and making demands, they are taken from you, in the sense that collective management is such that every component of filmmaking ought to benefit from what they are doing. They have rights they have to pay for, whether residuals or royalties. There are things that, I don't know if some of you are aware of the 2020 Beijing Treaty on Audiovisual Performances that has given rights to performers, right, to claim rights, enumeration rights on films that are exposed on such platforms. So you need to be careful, because the filmmakers may come after you or the telcos. I'm just trying to give that right. We need to be careful with those people, that things they kind of embed in their contracts. Even DSTV in Nigeria today, we are on the verge of taking them to court, you know, for residuals and royalties that they owe artists in Nigeria, you know. So you need to be careful with that. And Kaylin, that is heading a fund, or what do you call your Filmmakers Association of Namibia, those are the things you take into consideration. You need to develop rights platforms, you know, for the payment of rights to your members. It's such that some of the producers of platforms cannot enjoy the exclusivity or rights to those films in perpetuity anymore. Things have changed. You know, we need to, I'm very involved in that, you know, and there are international organizations that are supporting such moves. That said, I think something we need to consider when it comes to these co-productions, you know, the treaties, you know, the experience I'm having right now, right, is such that, you see, every country must develop, or some have developed values that they expect their filmmakers that are going to co-production to bring on board. But some of these values do not cut across the continent, right? And when it comes to particularly official co-productions, right, where you get your government involved, there are definitely going to be issues, you know, because I know South Africa has developed their very fantastic templates for co-production, but Nigeria, what we have is near absent. So because co-productions are all about what you are bringing on to the table and what you are offering your co-producer, right? So it's important that our respective governments, we're going back to government again, we need to encourage them to put in place policies, rules, if you want to call them loosely, that will help collaborating nations. Because the way we have them today, that's why I believe South Africa has not been able to do much with other African countries, not necessarily because the countries don't want to have it with them, but what incentives are the partnering countries offering in terms of what South Africa wants to bring aboard, you know? So like in Nigeria, when I met with my minister, he wasn't encouraged to support the initiative, right? Because we have nothing to offer, we have nothing to gain, right? So that is very critical. These treaties must take into consideration what everybody is bringing to the table. Thank you.
All right, guys, I'll keep it very brief. I just want to touch on what I think it was Wangeshi that mentioned this in terms of loans and banks and stuff. And I briefly touched on it earlier, and this is just because this is what I've observed in Namibia. And this is the data and the analytics. Part of why we struggle to get funding, especially from the private sector, is that we cannot show concretely the funds that are being generated from our said films, because marketing wasn't in place from the get-go. We don't necessarily keep track of how many people viewed my film, you know, how much money did I make from the premiere or the screening, how many people did I employ, what was my revenue, you know, what was my line items in terms of my total budget or my contribution to the GDP. So I think also moving forward, whether it's the film fund or whatever collaboration, is really to encourage our individual industries to keep track or at least collect this data. So when it comes to funding, that we can say, this is what we need, this is what you'll get, this is the audience you'll reach. We can guarantee you 500,000 viewers or in terms of that. And we need to start thinking of that from the onset. And then I want to touch just very briefly on what Mahmoud said, which is rights, copyrights, etc., buyout fees, which is so, so important. What I find in Namibia especially, and it is partly because we're still a young country in terms of our independence, etc. But a lot of the times we have TV commercials being done, documentaries. There's no standardized amount or structure in terms of payment, whether it's cost or crew. So when I hire people, I normally look at the South African rates and then try and find a balance. There's no general law or policy in place in Namibia currently in terms of filming with children or cost fees, etc. So for argument's sake, I'm doing a film end of the year and I'm using the South African guidelines in terms of that. So I don't know how big of endeavor it would be to somehow have like a general guideline in terms of fee structure, whether it's cost or crew, in terms of buyout fees or usage fees for cast and crew or artists and their work, because currently I think everyone is just a lot of people are just kind of ballparking it in terms of the type of production it is, the budget that it has, etc., etc. So I think it's just to have some sort of industry guideline that the different African countries could either adopt or use it as a guideline to for the individual countries, obviously based on the needs of the industry. And then the last thing, and I keep coming back to this, is the training. Similar with the funding and with rates, etc., etc. I find that on my sets, I have trainees that have been trainees for 4 or 5 years and longer, and they are exceptionally skilled at what they do, but they still get paid trainee rates. There's no protocol in place that says, okay, you're done being a trainee now, you've been evaluated, you are now an official crew member. You have shadowed a sound person, you've shadowed a gaffer, you've shadowed a director, you are now you're now a crew member and can earn the necessary rates. So again, I don't know what necessarily how big of an endeavor it is to also somehow find some sort of guideline in terms of training for our trainees and our film students, etc., to be able to gauge their progress within the industry. In terms of, this is where I was at, I've done all of this, I have learned all of this, you tick off your boxes, and now I can progress to the next level. And I think this is a very important skill, because especially when we have productions coming in and we're servicing it, we have people who are skilled, but on their resumes and stuff, all it says, you know, I've been a trainee for the past 5 years. There's no way to, There's no way to really gauge the skill that they have, or someone to sign off on it. Because not everyone goes to film school. I don't know who here has been to film school. I certainly wasn't. I went to law school and I'm a lawyer. And everything that I've learned by doing over the past 14 years. But there's no one that can give me a stamp and say, great, she's a producer now, or great, he can be a DP now. So some sort of measurement or gauge for us to give trainees or students or upcoming filmmakers that validation for themselves and for the industry that they've progressed from level A, B, C, or D. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Kaylin. Beverly, yes, I'll hand over to you in a second. But okay, Aziz, sorry, you want to come in? Okay.
Yes, please.
Can I hand over to you after Beverly, because she's had her hand up for some time, yeah? And what I'd like to do is just to prime everyone that we have just under 20 minutes. So maybe after Beverly and Azza's points, I'll ask everyone for concluding remarks. And perhaps, Jackie, if I may ask you to respond, to be the last to offer your concluding points as a way to kind of bring everything together. And perhaps without, perhaps try to figure out a way as to how this might be taken forward, if that makes sense. I mean, you say you listened to the conversation in the afternoon, you've also been participating here, and in some way you are playing a kind of convener's role in this context. So it might be interesting for you to kind of put it all together and start to maybe position some possible next steps to take the conversation forward at least. So over to you, Beverly, and then to Azza, and then we'll come to the concluding points. Thank you.
Okay. So this is just comments on some of the statements and that some people have been making. Mahmoud, I would 100% agree with you that IP is one of the most important things that we have to address. I think on a continent level, South Africa is way behind the rest of the world in terms of IP. I know filmmakers who have been making programs projects for the last 20 years and they don't own anything because they've done it for broadcasters, and broadcasters basically, you know, once they give you money, they own everything. We sit with the same situation with Netflix. If you do a Netflix commission, an original content Netflix commission, they own everything. Currently, this is being challenged because of the copyright bill that's in front of our government at the moment. That's under discussion. So IP is a huge thing. I believe that if filmmakers don't find a way to own at least a percentage of their IP, why the hell are they even bothering to tell the story in the first place? I really think that's very important. And then just in terms of standardized rates, I think that would be an absolute amazing venture if we can pull it off, that we standardize rates across the continent, because it's very different for different countries. I think right now, unfortunately, I am South African, but we act like we are the Americans in Africa, you know. South Africans, unfortunately, are incredibly arrogant, and I will... No, they are.
I'm so glad South Africans do that.
No, they absolutely act like the Americans in Africa. I mean, I am ashamed when I travel with South Africans in the rest of Africa, and I want to hide like, oh my God, I'm not like these people, you know. So what we must also be aware that we need to collectively work together, because right now we're taking issue with the fact that Netflix, for example, is one rate that they pay South African creatives, another rate that they pay European and American. And I think the way it works is European and America, and then come Africa, South America, and India. I mean, we're way on the, I'm currently doing a project with them, and I can't believe the differences that I'm seeing with colleagues in the UK and the budgets that they get and the budgets that we get, you know. So there's that perception again of Africa, you know, which we have to challenge. And then just in terms of training, I mean, I've been involved in the training landscape for a very long time, given that I've been in the industry for so long. And I really just got so irritated by talking to trainees on different productions. And I would ask them, so what have you learned? And they'd say, what brand of cigarettes everybody smokes and how many sugars everybody takes in their tea, you know, and then you know. This is not training. This is just, you know, somebody's dog's body, go fetch this, do that, and there's no actual training happening. But I must say, to give South Africa its credit, we have definitely moved beyond that in terms of the fact that most training that gets money now has to be accredited. There are unit standards based on the South African Qualifications Authority. You know, you have to be for myself, you have to be an assessor, you have to have done a particular portfolio of evidence, you've had to do a course. So training is far more formalized. Someone going through, I mean, I was training with Big Fish School of Digital Filmmaking, and we took our trainees through all of those unit standards so that at the end of it, they could actually go into second year at university because they had an NQF level 4, NQF level 5. So I think it's all about, once again, forums like this where we can start exchanging ideas and we can assist you with understanding of how you actually need to formalize training. And just to end off, hi Lisa, I see Lisa Aziz has been writing on the chat, and she's been offering some really amazing ideas around low-hanging fruits. For example, saying that we need to provide incentives for co-production international treaties, so projects that we encourage, say, between Kenya and Ghana and South Africa, in instances, Namibia, where we have those co-production treaties, that there are incentives to the filmmakers and probably government incentives that encourage filmmakers to work using these treaties. And then she also says that ensure that all content offered on public platforms, on public broadcasters, offers 20% of Pan-African product. Again, this has to be regulated by an industry body like ICASA or something like that. And it would mean that independent filmmakers in South Africa would have to lobby. So I think a lot of it's going to have to do with lobbying our respective governments in order to ensure that we start putting more effort into encouraging co-production and showing each other's products on the different platforms in the different countries.
Thank you, Beverly. Over to you, Asa.
Yes, thank you. I just want to refer to the outcome which you mentioned in the paper, that the United African Film Festival. How could we make it, and how could we work on African Film Fund? The two ideas which came out from our discussion. We have like 54 countries in Africa. Are we going to play it by countries or festivals? Which I like it. This idea, I like it very much, because it could be realized through countries. It will be difficult. You know, the independent or the civil society's entity could make it much better than the governmental institution. If we think about United African Film Festival and African Film Fund, African Film Fund must be participating by the governmental institutions. The African states themselves must be part of it, because it needs a huge money. But United Film African Film Festival. It could be made by independent. It could be funded. It could be helped by the existed African film festivals. But here we have to ask ourselves, how could it be different than the established African Film Festival? How could it could be different? What will be its goals? How it will be run or managed, and how it will be its setting. Also, on the other hand, if we think about the African Film Fund, here we could work on the the content and the profit or non-profit. I don't know. Also, we could work on training the filmmakers, which is very, very important. It must be transparent. It must be independent. It must have fair terms and regulations. It must have equal chances. It could play the role of seeds funds for the young, for creating cinema theaters or workshops and the co-production between African countries. If we have more films, we could have more successful festival or any other platforms. So I think it is I don't know. Do we have to choose or to work on one outcome? Or I think we could work on the two outcomes here from all the participants. So we could work on the marketing, distribution, content, as I mentioned, profit or not, non-profit, and training also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 12 minutes to go. So may I please ask each panelist to keep their closing remarks around 3 minutes at most. And perhaps I'll start with you, Wangeshi. We've missed your voice. So could you offer your concluding remarks?
I was waiting for the invoice, but
for the first thing tomorrow morning.
In closing, let me circle back to actually how this conversation started. The question was, do we need this initiative? Do we need to form this United Africa Film Festival? And if so, then what are the parameters and how do we go about it? And a lot has been shared and has been discussed, and some points very valid, actually all of the points very valid in terms of the way that we need to progress with this further. But my opinion is, as much as I do believe that the United Film Festival is a good initiative to start with, I would say let us first take a few steps back and rethink it a little bit. We have something called the African Audiovisual and Cinema Commission. It is not dead yet. It is just still hanging on a very loose thread. We need to revive that, from the current status that is in. And it takes me back to my discussion when I said we need proper governance, we need transparency, accountability. We need to set up these rules and guidelines so that the AACC then can be able to develop these initiatives and projects that we're talking about. This is in relation to training and skills development, as we have said. In relation to the film fans, they need to look into that. In relation to the co-production treaties and, of course, the distribution network and how then we can be able to get our content across Africa and for our audiences to watch. So for me, in closing, that is what I would say. Let us revive AACC. Let it do its job. Let's empower it. Let's have a good structure. We strengthen it. We support it. And I'm pretty sure all these other elements then will fall into place very easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Beverly, can I call upon you? And then maybe Mahmoud after Beverly.
Sorry.
You heard everything, Beverly.
Well, I think that the creation of United African Film Festival is a great idea and it's something that we should strive towards. I think we should start with small steps. And for me, that is the creation of collaborative content. We need to start identifying filmmakers that we'd like to collaborate with in other parts of Africa. And at this point, it doesn't necessarily have to be from South Africa, but if this platform that you guys have created, Jackie, them could be an outlet for young filmmakers to start making contacts with each other. I think we should encourage that, and I most certainly, given the fact that Trace is a company that traverses so many different African countries, I would certainly be looking to extend my hand to filmmakers in other parts of Africa and see what collaborations we can do. Just using an example with Canal Plus at this point, I'm largely stepping in to train the producers and writers in Nigeria that have come up with a concept to get them. I will be running the writers' room for them. I'll be going to Nigeria, working with them. Probably the same will happen with Ghana, and probably the same will happen with Kenya. And I think if we, in our own way, with small steps, can start working to develop collaborative content, I think then the idea of the creation of United African Film Festival will become a real one.
Right. Thank you. I think what we have in our hands is a kind of chicken and egg situation. We have the festival, or do we concentrate on getting the co-productions going first? To me, I would say that, look, let's operate as a festival because that was an essential thing that brought this whole up, right? Let's concentrate on the existing festivals, and if we can have collaboration with those existing festivals for us to have a United Africa one, themed, like I said earlier. But then, like Beverly said, the collaboration, the co-productions need to come fully up. And then we determine the kind of content we want our people to have. It's very essential. We don't just have to, I don't want to use the foul word, as filmmakers, we begin to enjoy ourselves with our films, and we are not getting out what the people want to see. Like in Nigeria, people always tell you that, are people going to watch your film, right? Who are you making the films for? It's very important. Who are we making films for? What kind of films do we want to push out there, right? So it's quite important that we decide on that, particularly when we're coming with these collaborations and co-productions. The festival, brilliant idea, but it needs the backing of our governments. The commission thing is kind of moribund today because despite the fact that they've all signed onto it at the AU level, but in spirit, are they really in it? So that's the question. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mahmoud. Asa, do you want to input here? It felt like your last contribution was very much around kind of concluding and drawing.
Yes, I just want to, yes, right, you are. I just want to add that if the United African Film Festival will be run or collaborate with the other existed African Film Festival, it could be more cost and less budget comparing to the other festivals, right? Because every festival will host it, will participate, will collaborate, will help. This one point. Second point, I suggest that the United African Film Festival could set like a theme every year as what we need this year. what we could talk about this year, what we need, the issue, something like that.
Thank you. Over to you, Kaylin, and then to Jackie. Thanks.
So I'll be very brief. Thank you guys very much for this. This was more than I expected it to be. Very informative, and I hope that we could post this discussion, keep in touch in terms of ways to move forward and also walk the talk. So just from my side, in terms of summarizing, is the distribution and the training. If we can collaboratively come up in terms of standardized guidelines for training or interns, because not all our interns necessarily went to film school, but they've learned on the job, in terms of to rate them for them to move on. And then also just very lastly, in terms of that training, just because Beverly mentioned that she is involved in training, I think, directors and writers. What I find from my observation in Namibia is that every intern that I've had, everyone, they want to become a director or a writer. It's kind of like it's the goal. But when I'm looking for a producer or a line producer or a production manager, I have to look so far because we also focus on just the creative side of any production. So I think it's time, and we've mentioned this now, the marketing side, that we start looking at the combination of the creative and the logistical administrative support, as that is equally as important. And this comes in with the training again. If we have some trainings for our production managers, our producers, in terms of how to negotiate a deal, what to look for in a contract when it comes to distribution or marketing, what the buyout fees are. We struggle with this because a lot of our producers and production managers, you name it, again, a lot of them have learned by doing, and there's no necessarily a standardized guide to follow in terms of this is what you must look for. And this is why we end up signing all our rights away. Exclusivity we sign off because we don't necessarily know what to look for in terms of that. So I'd like us to not only focus on the creative, but also everything else, the behind the scenes that is equally as important for crew members to understand. And this is why I like interns that want to become directors and writers. I like giving them grunt work to do so they can really understand what the ecosystem behind what the final product is, because we're also in love with this beautiful end product, but we tend to sometimes forget all the paperwork or the contracts or the negotiations or the deals and everything that went on behind the scenes that essentially made this product what it is. So I think just when it comes to training, for us to keep that in mind for our producers and production managers or head of departments per se, to also understand the ecosystem better.
Thank you. Shall I go for it, Sir Russell? Yeah, I mean, it's quite an impossible task, but I'm going to give it a stab and try not to be the arrogant South African whilst I'm doing it. It's been a really rich day today, and Russell and Chipo, thanks so much. I mean, you put such an impressive panel together of filmmakers from across the continent. I mean, I've just noted Cameroon, Rwanda, Namibia, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya. Those are the countries that have been represented, in this forum throughout the day. And, and I think in terms of networking, and I completely agree with Beverly, because it starts with collaboration, it starts with the filmmakers. We have the technology, we've seen today that you can actually bring filmmakers together from all these countries. And possibly as a way forward is to have some kind of a speed dating session, for want of a better word, but where you bring filmmakers together. We've got all these filmmakers from all these countries. They know filmmakers that are present in their countries that will be willing to collaborate. So we don't have to get on a plane, anymore. Let's use this platform and see how we can bring that together. I mean, there's been such a diverse range of key topics, films, the festivals themselves, and I completely agree with ASA, about the United African, Film Festival and the themes. We've got the festivals already. We've got the platforms. There's DIF, there's Luxor, there's Afrif, there's a Rwanda Film Festival, there's Kalasha that we've been hearing about today, and I'm sure there's more. So we have those key film festivals. They already have the infrastructure. They will already be inviting, filmmakers to come and attend those festivals. So how do we then weave in the United African Film Festival in that scenario and have it rotate to the different festivals? I think distribution has been underscored, endlessly. I think we really need to do a lot of learning around this. I think that's been my experience. We really need to learn and understand the role of distribution. When does it come in, in the production cycle? And I think we're hearing it's definitely not at the end. IP and ownership has also definitely been underscored. I think it's critical that we look at issues of IP. I think, several people have raised, the kind of deals that are out there that are really not favorable to filmmakers. And it's important. I think it's a learning process as well, that filmmakers, understand the role of IP and ownership. And, there's definitely some learning that we could do around those and, bring in experts, to speak on these topics. Training, I think, has also been definitely underscored in everything that we've discussed here. It's critical, that we have the crews resident in the different countries that can service, the big films when they come in, but also have a resident group of filmmakers in the countries producing local content. I think that is definitely the way to go. So, I mean, that's really what I have picked up in terms of the things that we need to start looking at. Exchange of knowledge. There's a lot of wonderful policy issues that, as you've mentioned, Beverly, Lisa Aziz has been putting up on the side there that we could look at. Also, issues that were brought up in the earlier session as well around policy. What can we share as South Africa? There's a lot of work that's been done. What has been done in other countries also that we can learn from a policy perspective. Government, I think we do need to lobby also along the way. These are huge initiatives that can only really gain pace if there is some kind of government support, for some of these initiatives. But we already have a lot. We've got a very rich a range of filmmakers. We've got good festivals, credible festivals on the continent that we can already start exploring. We've got experts, in different areas that we've definitely engaged with today, but there would definitely be more that we could bring into some of these discussions. And I really see, a series of these, and I'm not too sure how we'll structure it. It's something that we'd have to consider way more. But there's definitely takeaways that we can see how we can piecemeal start implementing them, and really not try and do everything. I think we have to have a very deliberate and measured approach. But I think it's all possible, and I think technology makes it, all the more possible. And yeah, I mean, this platform has been made available. I'm sure it can be made available again, but is, I think, something that we should definitely pursue. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Jackie. I know that it was a heavy load to put on your shoulders, but I think from the start of this conversation, there was a way that you were able to kind of connect points and respond to them in very kind of elegant and direct ways. And I thought I think this obviously, as someone of authority in the sector, it carries that much more gravity for you to kind of acknowledge these points. And hopefully we could lean on the Film Commission as well as the work of Chipo and the Center for Creative Arts support team as custodians of this conversation, and kind of rely on both institutions to drive this conversation forward in some kind of practical yet sustained way. Yeah, and so in no way are we saying we will address all of these concerns, but I think, as you've outlined, that we could perhaps think of a speed dating session following up to this, or some kind of industry feedback based on the rich information, inputs, and comments that have been generated over today. Yeah, and what I find as an observation, that this evening's conversation took a slightly different direction from that of the afternoon. I think the conversation of the afternoon spoke around mostly kind of the structure. It spoke more broadly around the strategic direction that such an initiative or a vehicle could take, whereas this conversation was really around some very detailed, as well as kind of focused quite a bit around content, IP, and the implications thereof. So again, I think it's given us two complementary kind of strands that we can dig into and see how we bring both together moving forward. So thank you for that, Jackie, and then also to thank everyone else who's participated in this conversation. It was a tricky time, 6 to 8 p.m. People are putting children to bed, making dinner, but you took time out to contribute to this conversation. So I'm utterly grateful for the time and the intellectual inputs. On that note, we are 7 minutes over time, and I apologize because this is my sole and primary responsibility to ensure that we all stick to the time. But you all had a lot to say and it was all rich. So thank you very much. And that brings us